Thank you for your attendance. I've received no apologies. Confirmation of the order of business. I've had no indication of a change to the order of business, so we'll proceed in line with the agenda items. Are there any updates to the interest register or any particular conflicts relating to specific items in this agenda? No? Okay, thank you. Public forum. We don't have any public forum. So we move to item 5, confirmation of minutes. These are the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June. Have a mover that those be accepted as a true record. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Barker. Any discussion on those minutes? Any items? If not, can I ask all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried, thank you. We move then to the status report. And the recommendation that the status report and its attachment be received. Only one item on there, which is an ongoing aspect of the Theatre Royal loan, which will come back to this committee, subcommittee, or its successor once officers have completed their task on it. Is there any discussion on that? Could somebody please move that that be received? I'm happy to move that if somebody seconds it. Oh, sorry, yeah.
When might that come back?
Do we have an indication? I think that still remains as early in the new triennium as the best we know at this particular point in time. It is on the status report, so I think we can, it'll be maintained as viable on that.
If I was on the committee, I'd probably ask for a date to be put on it.
Okay. Point noted. Any other discussion on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, given there's going to be a period of time, at least presuming there aren't any extraordinary meetings of the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee meeting to come, then I think probably an expectation that it would come to the first or second meeting of the committee would be reasonable. I mean, there's quite a period of time, obviously, probably to the first one, but that will depend a little bit on the work program that the new committee sets. I would expect it to come quickly after the triennium.
That's my understanding of the information I've had. It will come early in that new triennium and early to an early meeting of the new subcommittee. Is there any other points, Councillor Barker?
Yes, I was hoping that perhaps if it, I know it was only at the last meeting of this committee that the report was asked for, but I was hopeful that it might have either got here, or if it can't make it here, maybe to the governance committee. But
thank you, Councillor Barker. My recollection of the discussion at that meeting was that the expectation was, after that discussion at the last meeting, is that it would be into the new triennium, and hence the sorry, the item, I was looking for a recommendation, but of course it's in the document itself as it stands in the status report. It's prepared for the Audit, Risk and Finance Subcommittee or its successor, so I think it was anticipated that it would be into the new triennium at that stage.
Although that is not recorded in the minute.
It's recorded on the status report as such, yes. Yep. Okay, thank you. Is there any other points on that? If not, would somebody move that the status report be received? Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Murray. Moved by Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carry. Sorry, to the Governance Committee on the 25th of August. So the one thing that is sort of light in that report is the fact that how the completion of that questionnaire will take place. It will probably take place on SurveyMonkey, and officers will send that out to people. I have received one completed one at this stage, which we will make sure it does get transferred into SurveyMonkey. So that will come out in that fashion. Councillor.
Well, that was the question I was going to ask you, was about the collection and collation of the replies. It's all very fine to do a survey. Who do I give it to, and what are they going to do with it? Anyway, you've answered the question.
Thank you. So, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your efficiency in getting the documentation sorted out. And in my efficiency of completing paperwork, I now realise you were sending it to me for perhaps some feedback, but you got some responses. So I'll let you put those in SurveyMonkey, or I'm happy to do them. But I appreciated getting it. I found it actually a very useful exercise to go through as a review process, and I'm actually quite interested in perhaps we look at this as an approach for all committees. It's actually very good.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, the intention behind this is purely and utterly so that we can get the maximum out of the learnings over the period that this committee's been in place, and ensure that the next subcommittee of Audit, Risk and Finance, assuming there will be one set up by the new council, can be maximised from those experiences. So, could I have somebody move? I'm happy to move that my report be received. I'm actually happy to move that be noted for completion by members, and that Governance Committee be invited to do so, and that come back to the Governance Committee on the 25th of August. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on that? Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Sorry, one point I did want to make in my Chairman's report is that this is the last meeting of this Audit, Risk and Finance Subcommittee. And it's an opportunity for me just to thank members of the subcommittee for the support and the input they've provided to this subcommittee. I also want to record my sincere thanks to Chief Executive and her officers for the support and the input they've provided in getting this subcommittee up and underway, and I hope it remains an asset to Council. So thank you all for that. I would like that recorded if possible.
As Chair of the Governance Committee, the parent committee of the subcommittee, can I say that I have been very pleased with what's been achieved by the subcommittee and what's been the role that it's now playing, and also with the inclusion of our appointed members. I think it's all going very well, and I'm sure that the new council will surely follow a similar approach. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Buck. Right, moving on to item number 8, Council's key organisational risks and the progress report, pages 22 to 38.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really, at this point, a fairly routine report. It's just describing the things that have been done over the last 3 months as we work through, if you like, the Council's risks and deal with those ones which are higher and therefore deserving of more attention. I don't think I need any more introduction than that. I'm happy to take questions from yourself or members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughan. Any questions from the committee to Mr. Vaughan? Mr. Murray?
I suppose it's a comment as opposed to a question, and thank you for the report. And I too sort of got the comfortable sense that it was routine and sitting very, very nicely. But it's the sort of report really where we don't want to lose it in the comfort, is my comment. And it's great to see it. It's great to have it reported, and we just need to keep it in the focus moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I agree.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, through you, respond to the comment with a comment, and that is simply to say that we are, as I've indicated in the covering paper to the attachment, if I can put it that way, working on some improvements to the systems behind the scenes, and we will certainly be wanting to come back as was indicated, hopefully to this committee through in the new council, to provide you with some more information on those.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I too am really comforted with the identification of risk and the mitigation measures that have been identified in the process putting in. I'm looking at paragraph 6.1 in your report, the emerging risk area, and that seems to me like a reasonably substantial chunk of work and a reasonably big risk. And I'm just wondering how you say that you're trying to clarify the risk. Perhaps give me some sort of indication of what you're looking at doing.
Yes.
Because there's sort of the internal risk, there's the external risks to council, and then there's basically the ongoing risks afterwards about,
Thank you. In response, Mr. Chairman, to the member's question, I should point out that the council already has considerable systems in place to deal with what I'd call business continuity incidents. The question is really whether they all fit together in the way that they should, and that is why there's reference at the end to exercises and testing. So we really want to do a little bit of work on seeing that if the pieces we have actually bolt together in the way that we expect. I think that's probably the best summary I can give you, because there are a number of areas obviously in relation to the way the council reacts to things like flooding incidences and so on, and other things that might happen to this building.
subsequent question, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the response, and I'm just wondering, is the thinking going on about the enduring nature of this risk? For instance, if we have God forbid, a catastrophic event, and we could deal with the day and then the 2 days in, then it's there for a week, and then it's 2 weeks, and then it's a month, and then 6, and then it's 12 months later, and we're still in that so-called recovery phase.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, if I may respond to Councillor McGurk's question by pointing out that the general nature of, depending on what sort of language you like to use, either what's called disruption-related risks, that is, are what you do about disruptive events, or in the more sort of common business jargon, business continuity, is a series of steps which take you from what do we do now when something has happened to how do we get back to where we should be to run the services that the council runs. So both of those dimensions are there, and as I've said, what we have at the moment is parts of that quite clearly present, but it's the way they're connected that we're not particularly satisfied with.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it still concerns me that the highest risk area that we've got is the risk of customer aggression to our staff and to us around the table. And it disappoints me that that's still seen as the highest risk area. It means that our community has got a degree of aggression involved in it. I would like to see how it correlates to the returns that we get from our surveys of the reaction of people to the council in our annual surveys. It just concerns me that that highest risk area is the risk of abuse. What do we call it? Abuse and threatened. It's disappointing that a city like Nelson should have that as its highest risk. Just a personal viewpoint that well, I guess the question is, are you confident in your assessment that that is the highest risk?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I think what we are confident of at this point is this is one of a number of high risks to the organisation. I don't think you can regard this, which we happen to have numbered as number 2 in a group of 10, as necessarily the highest one. I would also say that one of the things which has come out of the council implementing the Health and Safety at Work Act is that we now have much better recording systems to find these incidences. And so we are probably reporting them and recording them better than we ever have in the past. And how much of that is that we're learning more about them, and how much of that is really and increase incidence? I don't think I can answer for you until we've got some more data.
I thank you. I accept that we have got probably more data now than we've ever had before through the systems we've had to bring in because of legislation. And but I still, with disappointment, see it's rated. We're given a very high rating there.
If I
And
may,
I just hope that it's not a situation of a result of frustration related to council services or not, and that's why I would like to see if there's any correlation with the annual survey of report of citizens that we do.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Can I just ask Mr. Vaughan, is that survey of the citizens, is that something that comes to you in your capacity as a senior officer of the organisation?
the answer is I haven't specifically looked at the relationship which Councillor Barker has just described. It's certainly something that we may want to look at in the future, but what I would say is that having worked for a number of regulatory organisations before coming here, an organisation such as this, which does regulate the community, that's a fact of life. We do issue parking offence notices. We do require people to do things about dangerous dogs and so on. You will inevitably get a proportion of those people who react adversely to that. That's unfortunately one of the things which happens if you are doing those activities. And yes, people may say on the one hand that they're satisfied with the council services, and the next day an officer turns up and says, well, look, I'm sorry, I've got to confiscate your dangerous dog, and they're now not happy. So yes, we're going to get some of that tension inevitably, I think. It is the nature of the organisation. And yes, we're probably seeing and understanding it better than we have in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughan. And I must admit, having been involved in a front-facing organisation with the emergency department at the hospital, it's something that inevitably arises, and sometimes very out of character with the individuals concerned. It's emotion at the moment. Mary's.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not necessarily a question, but just a comment in relation to the key risk area 3, which is reputational damage from negative media exposure. I would actually like to highlight what I think is a growing risk, or perhaps just a current risk in relation to this matter. And that would be what I am seeing in terms of the way news stories are being generated. Absolute congratulations to the Nelson Mail on their nomination into the awards at the moment. But I could say in the last probably 7 days, our comms team have had to send through multiple corrections in relation to matters that are not factually correct in terms of council stories. And I would look at one at the moment that I understand it has gone through to ask it be corrected. It hasn't been corrected, but it is actually recording things that are factually wrong. So I'd use an example of an article that applied to say that the Resource Management Act doesn't apply to special housing areas. Quite wrong. Recording an article around the Code of Conduct debate that Councillor Laurie, with his background in journalism, could not support the recommendation to keep the code as it was, followed by that he would not support the code as it stood. Well, we know sitting in the meeting that Councillor Laurie voted to keep the code as it was, and that is factually wrong. And so what I'm interested in is actually how council is dealing with that issue, because there is real potential for reputational damage given the immediacy of news, the fact that the stories are going up not through the traditional process of having gone through sub-editors and editors review, and there is this push to get news loaded almost instantly. The problem with that, if it is wrong and factually wrong, is that that sets the scene, and it's very, very difficult for council to then undo that record. That story I just read from is several days old. The advice has gone through to the Nelson Mail to ask to be corrected. It hasn't been corrected, and then it stays as the public record. And so what I'm flagging is potentially for our communications team the need to almost be actively sending out after our decisions the facts of the matter to ensure that the journalists have got them. Now that puts a real tension and workload on our organisation, but the risk of not doing it at the moment I think is leaving us quite vulnerable. And I mean, they're just a very small number of a very large number of inaccuracies that we've seen in stories. And I think that's a reflection. I'm not saying, this isn't necessarily a criticism of the journalists who are writing. It's a reflection of the work pressures that they are under and this demand for instant news. The trouble is it then becomes essentially the public record. And we may think we keep the public record, but actually we know that ends up being the public record. So I'm just wondering if the officers have contemplated this and had any thoughts about it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Vaughan?
I respond, Mr. Chairman, by absolutely agreeing with the Mayor's comments. We live in an age where the transmission of information is becoming nearly instantaneous. And one of the things which we had to look quite carefully at in this area was whether we have a good measure of the risk level, if you will, because traditionally measures of these things look only at the type of media that the Mayor was describing. Those organisations that have editors and sub-editors and so on. But in fact, a lot of information is grabbed and put on the social media. And I see this, what's happening, the instances that the Mayor has described, as something of a reaction to the fact that social media is running ahead of the conventional media and that those checks and balances are much harder to do. We do actively try to respond in the social media space to try to deal with that because it's faster. Do we catch it every time? I don't think so. And I suspect it's nearly impossible to do so, to be honest, with the sort of speed these things are moving at. And the council may consider, and I don't think we have, in another organisation we ended up with a story which was not only nationally important but blatantly wrong. And one of my colleagues at that time took the journalist concern to the Press Council. Now that gave that organisation pause to think about what they did next time. So there are avenues available, but they have to be used, I would suggest, to this committee and indeed generally, with some caution.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Chair, just in commenting, what I think it highlights for me, and it's around resource. So it's around, in order to manage that risk, which I see as a growing risk, not a diminishing risk, it creates a demand for resources that we haven't seen before in terms of council, because the challenge for us is that we know, and if we look at the reputational survey work that Local Government New Zealand has done, we know we've got a long way to go to improve our reputation. What I see here, and what we also know is that we see a fair bit of this across the board. If it's growing, we're going to actually have to resource it, because the consequence of not doing so is that the value of local government and the work that we are doing is undermined, and I find that is really not an acceptable outcome. So what I'm really signalling to this committee is, we might say, well, what are the costs and why are we involved in a communications department? There are good reasons around that, because we need to communicate what we do to the community so they understand it. But increasingly now we've got to deal with another issue, is actually fixing information that in the past, would have been addressed by editors and sub-editors. Now those people don't exist. They don't exist in organisations. Journalists are instantly loading up the stories. So I want to highlight it because the temptation is to do nothing. The temptation is to say, oh, it doesn't really matter, it's yesterday's fish and chip wrapping. Well, the layer upon layer upon layer of that actually causes us a problem, and I want us to be aware of it and probably highlight, to the Chief Executive, that it's an area that I would like some, I know it's already an area of focus, but it probably needs some discussion with Council about how much resource, how we approach that. And I think it really does require some direct engagement with our, particularly our local media, who are the main source of information for the public, to say, how can we get to a better system here? Maybe we need to do more briefing of journalists before off agendas. We need to spend more time with that. Maybe we need to make sure that after meetings we send out a summary of the meeting key facts document. That may be the way to address it. But we do need to do something.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Barker.
Just following up from that, the other thing that I've noticed is that the emails that we get headed Media Alert, which the comm staff have tracked down all of the items, articles in the newspapers that relate to the council. They do also go around the country. Am I correct in that? Because I know that colleagues of mine from around the country say they can keep up to date with what Nelson is doing, and I've presumed it's from there, or is it from the local government New Zealand news that comes out, and did they get it from the media release?
Chief Executive.
Mr. Chair, my understanding is that there is a service through Local Government New Zealand that picks up all of the media releases put out and indeed stories run in the media across the country, and then that is shared within the sector every Monday and Thursday. So that is certainly how I would expect your colleagues and other authorities to be keeping up to date.
So if there is an incorrect article in a newspaper, can our staff put a rider on the media release file that gets sent out, say that there's an inaccuracy there?
Mr. Chair, I'd have to look into how that service runs. I think they're picking it up from the published story, so I'd need to make inquiries. I'm not sure that is an affirmative, regretfully, but I'm not sure that is the case. I will make inquiries.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Any other questions? I have just two quick comments I'd like to make, Mr. Vaughan. One is it's a semantic issue, probably not surprising coming from me as a semantic pedantic, but having some risks that are classified risks that matter. To me, all risks matter. I appreciate that it doesn't necessarily undermine the others. There's just a danger that it does, and I've been used to seeing priority focus areas or something like that, but every time I saw it, I had to say to myself, yeah, and the rest do too. But the second point also relates to number 3, the reputational damage from negative media exposure. And I suppose it's really just a reminder that reputational damage, while certainly exacerbated by negative media exposure, doesn't only arise through that. We can have reputational damage arising through other reasons. Negative media exposure is certainly one reason why you could get reputational damage, but there are a number of other areas as well. It's just a reminder that that we don't just focus purely on the media side of reputational damage in our risk control focus. Thank you.
I will look, Mr. Chairman, in response to that latter point, I'll look again at the wording. We are very careful, and we have been very careful in looking at this, to not stop with the conventional media. So let's be quite clear that the other ways which people publish information, opinions, and as the Mayor has pointed out to us, sometimes incorrect facts, are also of concern to the Council and are covered within this area. But I'll look at another way to describe that if that's helpful to you.
Understood. It's just really reassurance that it's not just focused in that area, and it was an expected reassurance that I got. I understood that to be the case. Any other questions? If not, would somebody move that the...
I'm happy to move.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move, but I've also just a final question for Mr. Vaughan. Just in terms of this issue of if we have an event where Civic House is unable to be accessed, or we have loss of services, I have a very important piece of paper with the how to, if I can't log into the in an event, log into the system, that I have my little piece of paper to tell me how I need to do it. We're probably overdue for a trial to make sure that I haven't lost my little piece of paper. I'm just saying, in the sense of, when are we due for a next round of essentially, you know, emergency response trial? Because it's quite a while since I've done one, actually.
Madam Mayor, through the chairperson, I can't give you an exact date, And it is, I think what you've illustrated is that we don't do this sort of thing as frequently as we should be doing it to assure ourselves that it's working. And that's why I make the comment in here that we do plan to do some more testing. Can you? I give you a precise date? No, because we are in the process of setting up a series of things to work out how best to fit those together. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Through the chair, this report on the insurance renewal covers a little bit of background, some of it specific to the current renewal, and also a couple of other things that are happening in the sector. It may interest this committee to know that our expenditure on insurance is in the region of $1.1 million a year. So it is something that occupies a little bit of time and space for officers. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Questions? Councillor McGurk?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hughes. I suppose that the split is we've got the local the LAP policy, which deals with basically our capital assets, the stormwater and the roads and stuff like that, and we've got the top of the South Collective, which is dealing with probably our operational stuff, the cars and liability. Is there a risk that there's a gap in somewhere in between those two insurance regimes that we might have missed or we're blind to?
Through the chair, this is something that's top of mind, particularly for Ms. Harrison. We're constantly doing pieces of work to ensure that doesn't happen. This year, on the work plan of my team, is a larger item to completely reconcile that and give ourselves comfort that isn't actually happening.
I know the situation where
Thank you. Other questions for Ms. Harrison? Councillor Barker?
Yeah, thank you. In relation to the LAP, this report that we've got from Tonkin and Taylor and Aon, what's the is it a statutory requirement that Treasury got to be involved in that before we actually make the decisions? I see in section 5.5 it's still being reviewed by Treasury.
The Chief Executive will respond to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The process around LAP and the involvement of Treasury is actually because Treasury are doing a piece of work around the future of the government's 60% contribution to the council's 40%. And because of that, they have commissioned the work because they're using us as one of the study areas to inform them in terms of their national approach. And it's for that reason that we've certainly benefited from the work that they've been doing, and that's the reason why Nikki is proposing that we continue to wait until that work is reviewed by Treasury and finalised, because without it we don't have the information that we would want. They have commissioned it, and it is going to inform the government's decision going forward. So the recommendation here is to stay as we are, but note that there will be more work coming.
So we will determine the actual level of cover
In due
once that's
course,
received.
yes.
Is it likely to be in this term of council?
I don't believe so.
So have we got adequate cover in the meantime, do you believe?
The short answer to that is yes. This is certainly a piece of work that might refine that.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Any other questions relating to insurance renewal? I have a mover, Councillor McGurk. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Murray, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Ms Hughes, for that, and you'll stay there for item 10, the corporate report. Over to you on that.
Through the Chair, the corporate report is to the 31st of May, which somehow seems like an awful long time ago. You'll note that the position in terms of surplus deficit isn't a great deal different than it has been previously. We've done quite a lot of work, obviously, since the 31st of May, and we're getting a slightly better view of what our 30th of June position would be. Notwithstanding the upcoming audit and various revaluation effects, I wouldn't expect the end of year position to be a great deal different to what's reflected in this report.
Is that in terms of the operating side of it, or the capital side, or both?
Both. More on capital coming up.
Is there any questions? You happy to take questions at this point?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Any questions for Ms Hughes? Mr Murray?
Yes, thank you. I just, are you going to work through the attachments one by one, or is it just on the front?
That's the intention to do that. As well.
Oh, okay, so at this stage I'll just wait for the attachment to come up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just see if there's any more general questions for Ms Hughes. If not, perhaps you can take us through the attachments then. I'll ask you to do that rather than me, because you can probably move it along quicker, but obviously starting with page 47.
Starting with page 47, the operating surplus is, I think, in the region of 3.6 million. Capital expenditure looks a long way behind budget. I'd like to remind everybody of the carry forward report that came to you at the last meeting of this subcommittee. Yes, I'm happy to take any questions on that, although the detail comes up on the next sheet.
We'll move straight through to the detail, I think, because that's probably where the questions best arise.
Yes, thank you. In the detail on page 48, could you just provide a wee bit more explanation around, it's the second dot point, it talks about 1.1 million relates to forestry with the brook harvest not yet finalised but estimated at 150,000. Are we saying there that we're going to be short $1 million in revenue from the brook harvest? Is that what that's saying? And if that's the case, how did that happen?
Through the Chair, it's not quite what it's saying. It's saying that the brook harvest did occur. 1.1 million relates to the activity as a whole. So there is some shortfall for the brook harvest, but it's other harvest, I think it was Mai Tai, that is the main part of that 1.1 million. Yes, it is a shortfall, but forestry is a closed account.
So you're saying that the 1.1 or $1 million shortfall is primarily because we didn't harvest the Mai Tai, so that may happen next year, for instance. So we haven't lost it really, we've deferred it into the next year, would be my interpretation of what you've just said.
Mr Levertis?
So through the Chair, that's the exact explanation. So we didn't undertake any harvesting other than the brook because it was on hold pending the review, and so that hasn't happened this financial year other than the brook, and depending on what happens future down the line, it will potentially impact on the next financial year, but for this year it's because it didn't happen.
Okay, and can you just remind me about closed account, because when you said that it's sort of like, oh, it's like hidden behind doors and closed and we can't see it, but I'm sure that's not what you mean. Can you just remind me about the closed account and the impact, of why we're sort of highlighting it's in the closed account?
Certainly, through the chair. A closed account is essentially a self-funding account, so there is no public money, if you like, that is put in there as income. Also, forestries is very particular in that the surpluses and deficits are actually capitalised. Does that help?
Any further questions in this area of detail on the operating and income expenditure? No. Can I just ask, in terms of the top of the next page, the unspent budget for the events contestable fund being transferred to a reserve at year end, is that the normal treatment of unspent funds in that particular account?
Through the chair, in that particular account, yes, that is the normal treatment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just go back to the forestry. If we deferred it, is there a risk of a diminishing value of the asset or the crop as it's allowed, because there is an optimum time, and if we don't harvest them at that optimum time, the value of the crop can be diminished. There's also other fluctuations of what the market's doing at that particular point in time. So, can you graze in your crystal ball, please?
Yes, I understand the question through the chair, and yes, certainly those impacts are possible. We have advice from Olsen's about when these optimal times are to harvest, and we would continue to take their advice unless someone knows more than me.
Mr. Chair, I think that if Councillor McGirt was referred to the report, which is actually on the commercial subcommittee's agenda, you'd find that there is a recommendation that a harvesting plan be prepared, and it does say that there is a window of opportunity around which council should consider it a critical success factor for maximising returns.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Any other questions in that area?
No,
Move on to page 50. Oh, sorry, Madam Mayor.
Apologies, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to go back to page 47, just in terms of the capital expenditure. And yes, it is. Look, and we'll see it later on. We see the graph. It is looking surprisingly low, I have to say, in terms of where I was expecting it to be for this meeting. So I was expecting, are we going to see, what are we anticipating seeing by end of June? Do we have a sort of final figure? We must have that about now.
Through you, Mr. Chair. If you turn to page, I think it's page 57, my version doesn't have page numbers. Am I right then? 53. There's a table there which shows the trend of capital expenditure. So the numbers to the end of June, the whole of council, or the whole of organisation capital budget was approximately 62 million. At the end of June, approximately 45 had been spent. In June, we reported to AF a carryover that we had estimated at 14.3 million, and that gives us a difference now of about 2.6 million. The carryover, the 14.3 carryover, just to explain that, at least half of that is Trafalgar Centre, Rutherford Park, and the School of Music. So there are big meaty projects there that are multi-year projects that are still to be completed. Now the 2.6 million is made up of, there'll be some subtle difference in the carryover over the month to the end of June, but it's mainly made up of projects that were cancelled, not completed, because the requirement was no longer there to complete them, so they're effectively a saving. What we refer to as genuine savings, which are projects where we have delivered the benefits that the project was intended for, but we've been able to do it in a cheaper, more cost-effective way, and in my view, they are to be celebrated because we've used our ingenuity and found better ways of doing things. And then there are a number of projects that are deferred beyond 16-17. So they're projects that during the investigation stage we found that we don't need to do the work in 15-16 or 16-17, so they don't feature in the carryover report and they've been pushed out to later years.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just need to, we might just need to reconcile these outside the meeting. I just had a figure end-of-year capital numbers that were, I have in my mind in the order of 50 million, and but I'll just need to check those, just in relation to delivery of KPIs. I think, but it's right, I'll have to refer to another document to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We sort of moved to the capital, but I'll come back to the debt and the balance sheet. Are there any questions relating to those, Mr. Murray?
Just a point of clarification, just to confirm my own understanding, but I'm looking at page 50, I think it's page 50, it's the debt over 12 months, and it would appear to me that the debt has gone for council from round about 74 million, I think, on the June 15, and is currently sitting just under 79 million, if I'm reading that correct. So it's only really increased in terms of our external debt 5 or 6 million over the year at this stage. That would be correct?
Through the Chair, yes, that is what this graph shows, and yes, that is correct. I can tell you where we sit right now is in the region of 90 million. So all of the very large invoices that we get in June don't get paid till July, and that's the cause of that big jump between May and now.
And of course you've got rates in the bank, but you've offset that against debt obviously, so that'd be a couple of million as well in that equation.
I'm sorry, through the Chair, could you repeat that?
Well, as at May, you will have had rates, cash in the bank, which would have offset against debt, which is why it's artificially low, because you've still got a month of operating expenditure to get out.
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
Any other question, page 50, relating to the debt? 51, balance sheet.
Not on the balance sheet, but on the next one, on the debtors.
Thank you.
So on page 52, thank you for including the 3 month and over debtors at 10,000. I suppose it's just, again, a point of clarification. We've got 2 debtors sitting there, and both of them have a payment plan in place of an amount. It's one thing to have a plan, presumably they're being adhered to.
Through the Chair, I did check that specifically, and yes, they are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just regarding the 2 in the middle, the Tasman Bays Heritage Trust and the Theatre Royal, the scheduled fully repaid date or remaining term is the 35 years, is that? It just seems you've got 2 different ways of reporting this. Are you expecting both of those to change, or it's just we've got 35 years left and 25 years left? Am I right?
Through the Chair, yes, you are right, yes.
Any further questions on that? Any further questions? We'll move to the major project summary. Are there any questions on that or anything that staff want to highlight? Note the absence of red marks. Okay, we'll start with page 57. No, we'll move to page 58. Any questions on items of page 58, Councillor Noonan?
I've got several on this one, Mr Chair. The first one is the Maitai Shared Path. It says the Works and Infrastructure Committee approved to defer the project to start in 2017 and 18, but it only has a budget of $5,000, so I'm just wondering what we're going to do with the $5,000.
Through you, Mr Chair, that's the current year's budget, so that was for investigation at that early stage rather than the whole project cost.
Can we be updated, please, Mr Chair, as to what's happening with that project?
Through you, Mr Chair, it's been deferred to 17-18, so we'll begin the investigation in 17-18 financial year.
I have a couple of other questions on that page. Shall I just carry on? The St Vincent to CBD cycle connection. It says in the comments that targeting approval of concept design at the Works and Infrastructure Committee meeting in August, which was this morning, and it wasn't on there. I'm just wondering when that's going to come through.
Mr Chair, I might be better placed to answer that rather than Mr Davies. Because that was the Works and Infrastructure's last meeting for this triennium, it will of necessity be reported to, assuming there is a Works and Infrastructure Committee, to the first meeting in the new triennium.
And one more, the Modellers Pond solution. I've got them all today, haven't I?
Mr Chair, that is currently on Council's timetable to be returned to the Council table in September.
It says December on here, so is that a typo? Because it was on there last time as December, so I thought I'd raise it this time because of that.
It should be September.
Oh, fine. Thank you. That's good. I'll alter it on mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Any other questions on that page? If not, we move to the final page of the major project summary, page 59. No? If there's no further questions, did I hear a mover for the corporate report? Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Do I have a seconder? Mr Murray. Any further questions or discussion? Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. You're still in the hot seat, Ms Hughes, with the bad debt write-offs for the year ending June 2016.
Point of order, Mr Chair, if I may. There is a second part to that resolution that the unbudgeted expenditure of $50,000 be approved.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Barker. Do I have a seconder? Mr Murray, any discussion relating to that item?
Yes, thank you through the chair. I appreciate this is a carry forward from previous meeting and that we identified in respect of the fact that additional resource was needed for the internal audit function, and we were going to need to resource that externally. My question at this point is around, has this been scoped and estimated based on the scope, or is this just a bit of a we think we need?
Through the chair, Mr Murray, it's been a combination of both, and I have had some scoping through, and particularly in relation to something that you are all very interested in, which is business continuity planning, and that is something that's going to happen this year. So there's going to be a full review done with that. So that sits really nicely with your concerns in relation to risk. And that came in at around about $12,000. So to me that was a really important review to be done externally. And from there I've had some indication of what some of the other costs will be, but I have only put out one set of terms of contract really. I've put them out, and but that's what I think it'll be. I think it's reasonable. And it'll be a moving target.
Thank you, Mr Murray. Any further questions on that? If not, it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Noonan.
Thought you were. I was just looking at the special housing areas, and this was. I'm just wondering if the government are going to pay the costs that we've had on that, Mr Chair.
Sorry, under which area are you
On
raising
page
this?
45 under 8, we didn't come back to the beginning part, and we've gone through page by page, but there is some costs associated with our staff being involved in the SHAs, and I'm just wondering if we can request that funding from the government, since that was their idea.
Is that something we normally do?
We haven't had one of these
Can do.
before, but yeah, it'd be good if we could.
Mr Chair, the government has given no indication that it is prepared to back up costs of that particular piece of legislation.
Sorry, I had assumed that by moving through to the attachments we had completed that report. Is there any other items on the report that people want to cover and go back to? I assumed we'd moved past that. If there isn't, I still have a mover and seconder. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we move to bad debts write-off. Ms Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This is a end of financial year wrap-up, essentially, and we find ourselves in a slightly improved position on prior year, our write-offs for 2016 being a shade over $9,000. These write-offs are within the delegation of the Group Manager of Corporate Services, so really this is a for your information.
Thank you, Ms Hughes. Any discussion on that? Sorry, Councillor Barker, Mr Murray, Councillor Noonan.
Just a question. I would have thought perhaps it was no money, no dog, for the dog impounding fees.
I'm sorry, could you explain what you mean by that?
The dog impounding fees, was it $6,000 I think I saw there not being paid. The dogs are in the impound because they've been found wandering or they haven't got a registration or something. Why are we releasing them before the owners have paid the fees? Maybe the dogs have not been released. Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Through the Chair, my understanding is that if the fees are not paid, then the dogs are euthanased.
So we're going to be very unlikely to get any money from them. It's good luck to creditmans.
Again, a comment that the write-off level under 2,500 is decreased, and I noted that. But I seem to think that given our other revenue, other than rates, is around about 46 million, $9,000 is a fabulous result in my view, and I certainly support the continued chasing of this money, but I think that that's not a bad result, and if small things like the dog pound fees can be tidied up, it'll be even less. So I'm very happy with this report.
Thank you, Mr Murray. I agree, it's a good result for an organisation of this size. Councillor Noonan.
Well, thank you. My question is related to the monster slide and the $2,000. We took, I recall, a bond. Has that been, was that, well, we talked about taking a bond. I don't know whether we did in the end, but did that come off the debt?
Through the Chair, I'm unaware of the exact circumstances around this. I can get back to you if you wish. If we did have a bond, then yes, it would have gone towards the debt.
Okay. And I'd just like to say, Mr Chair, that to thank those people that are chasing the debt, because that's not an easy job. It's one of the ones I've done in my past, and it's not that easy. So pass our congratulations on to those at the coalface that often don't see what we do, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Any further questions of Ms Hughes on this report? If not, can I have a mover that the bad debts report write-off for the year be received? Mr Murray. Seconded, Councillor McGurk. Any further debate? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Ms Anderson, thank you very much for the internal audit report, item 12.
Right, through the chair, this is just to the end of June. It does incorporate some of the audits that were due in the audit report that we have, that has been approved by Audit, Risk and Finance and Governments and Council for the year to the 30th of June 2017, which were due for completion in July. So after this was produced, there has been some further work done, and I'll just go through those things and let you know. And that's mainly in relation to the audits proposed for July 2016. And if you go to, I don't know what your page is, but it's the second page of my attachment, Founders Heritage Park. That one is listed there as being in progress. That's now complete, and the report is being presented to the manager tomorrow. The Privacy Act is also complete. It's been sitting with the corporate manager, the manager of corporate services. I'm waiting to hear back what we will do about that. And the golf course, I've completed all the scoping. The audit groundwork has been done, and I'm in the process of writing the report now. The two at the bottom, I am having some difficulty with contacting Audit New Zealand, who have completely new staff, and the reason that I need to contact them is because they have done some of this audit work. They do it on a regular basis as part of their external audit, and I need to be sure that I'm not duplicating work that they do. And unfortunately, I'm having a little bit of difficulty getting back with that information, but those audits will be done in due course. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that update. Good to see the progress that's happening on that. Thank you. Questions for Ms. Anderson? Mr. Murray?
Thank you. I noticed in the fifth column there, findings, risk ratings and finalised approved audits, you rank significant, high, moderate and minor, and none of them appear to have, one's in high cash handling at Civic House, but most of them are in the minor or moderate category, the recommendations. Presumably there's been some fixes to those over the period of time, and therefore around, say, for instance, cash handling Civic House, I don't have anything to be concerned about at this committee level about cash handling in Civic House, and likewise for segregation of duties and IT access and electronic purchase orders. So I can, in my head, put a tick next to those systems that they're working okay. Oh, and the other ones, of course, accounts payable, etc.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Any other questions? If not, could I have a mover that the report be received and that a recommendation to Governance Committee and Council that the internal audit findings to 30th of June be noted as detailed in the report? I'll take those two together. Mr. Murray, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Parker, thank you. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. And I would ask for I think we move into, includes the public business. Could I have a mover and a seconder that we move into public excluded? Thank you, Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor McGurk. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.